you think that people on the left won't talk to other people? If so, why? Like publicly talk to people?
I think there's a couple different parts of a left versus right belief system that can play into people's proclivities to talk to each other. So for instance, on the left, you've got people who talk about like the paradox of tolerance, to where if you're tolerant of viewpoints that are very intolerant, then you run the risk of those particular viewpoints becoming so popular that it basically bullies out all of the tolerant ones, because intolerant people try to get rid of tolerant people, basically. That's an idea you have on the left. I will say, though, that there are similar types of ideas that show up on the right. So, for instance, the biggest arguments that people on, I don't know if I'd say far right, but like very religious right will give against LGBT stuff as well. If these LGBT ideas become really popular, our kids are all going to become trans, and then we're going to lose the culture war that way or whatever. So, honestly, at the end of the day, I really think that if you have a lot of power, I think that the more power you have, the less you're into the whole freedom of speech and talking to people that disagree with you, because you don't need to. You already have like the majority cultural power. So I think as of recently, you've seen kind of the left has more cultural power than the right, at least in terms of like media and schools and everything. So why would they want to give the right a platform? And now the right is very big on like freedom of speech and everything. Even if they go back 20, 30 years ago, they wanted to censor all the LGBT stuff, get rid of like violence in video games, get rid of all the stuff that offended them. But now that they're on the back foot, they're like, well, no, actually everybody should have freedom of speech.
So you don't think there's anything intrinsic to the ideology that causes people like with identitarian concerns to not talk to other people? You just think it's who's in power?
As I've gotten older and as I've gone through more and more of these, seeing like the come and goes of different types of political ideologies, I'm less feeling like there's stuff intrinsic to political ideologies, and more that political ideologies just tend to be the manifestation of a bunch of really similar foundations of belief from people. That's like the feeling I have.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you're the incumbent in a presidential race and you're way up in the polls, you don't want to have any debates. If you're way down in the polls, you need more debates.
Yeah.
So I think there's a similar principle operative there about having the power. It does seem to be something particularly intrinsic to the left. I mean, it's certainly intrinsic if you look at the ideologies that underlie it, the academic ideologies that buttress it or underlie it. But I do find it concerning because we have an impossible time to get people who are proponents of critical social justice on the show. Like they just won't come on. And the consequence of that is people always accuse us of being like, you're not inviting them on, the emails got lost. I mean, it's insane. So how do you, I mean, you talk to those people or no?
No, they don't talk to me.
Why don't they talk to you?
I think that depending on how far left you go, you're getting into like academic circles and stuff, and they just don't talk to many people at all. If you're talking about like the big shows, I don't know, I just don't think people in big shows in general have very many combative conversations or very many adversarial conversations, because it seems like kind of what you just said before, the upside is almost non-existent. Like, okay, well, I can talk to a person and I guess I can get some views on a video, but the downside, if you do really poorly in a conversation, is almost unlimited. You can have a conversation that ends your career technically if you have it horribly enough. So yeah, I mean, on the far left, it's hard to find people that will have those conversations. But I mean, on the far right, like how many earnest debates does like Ben Shapiro do, where it's like a hardcore debate against somebody, or like even a Steven Crowder, or even a Jordan Peterson? Like these people aren't generally having like hardcore debates. They do step out sometimes, but you know.
Yeah, and it bothers me when I go to the conferences, the quote unquote anti-woke conferences. It bothers me that they have panels in which everybody is agreeing with everybody else in the panel. It bothers me. Okay, so I think this is really important. I am completely, not only am I sympathetic, like I get it, I grok it, I completely understand that you can't get people who are identitarians to come on and speak at your conference, and you can't have debates. Like I get that. But why can't you have people steel man those positions and say, look, this is the quote unquote good faith representation of these positions? I don't see that. I see these as forwarding anti-woke ideological narratives, many of which, by the way, in my experience, have been Christian nationalist in its origin, in its orientation. But I do see these competing echo chambers constantly branching out with ideological conformity baked into the system, and I find it incredibly disturbing.
I think that for a lot of people, the vast majority of people, it's probably just part of the human condition is you inherit a lot of the applied moral positions and applied political positions of the people around you. And you don't actually do all the work to think from, here's my moral foundation, here's my epistemic, whatever, and then I'm gonna have like an applied, ethical position or applied policy position. You don't really do that work, you just kind of inherit it from the people around you. And I think one of the consequences of that is an applied political position becomes a replacement for foundational moral statement.
So 100%.
Yeah. So if I say if I say that I believe that a certain people are like either committing genocide, or if I say a certain group of people are like against rent control, what I'm really saying is that like I just don't like what these people are doing because it breaks away from my applied position. So then if you have another person who's against your applied position, they believe something different, it might be something like minimum wage. You're against minimum wage and they're for minimum wage. Well, it's because they hate business and they hate people and they want everybody to fail, because you can't even conceive of a different foundation of a belief when you don't have a foundation for your own beliefs.
Yeah, and that's why one of the things that I've learned over the last 15 years, I've been acutely aware of the role that community plays and how people want to maintain their relationship. It's somewhat related to audience capture, and it's somewhat related to we want to belong, we want community, we don't want to go against the community, we want to all kind of, have our own champions. And I think that is a recipe in philosophy called doxastic closure, or closing or constricting one's beliefs. It's a kind of moral strangulating people morally as well. So let me ask, I'm curious about a few things. So
I will say on that, just because it's not necessarily a bad thing. You can imagine that you probably need some level of ethical cohesion or even factual cohesion for groups of people to operate together, right? Like you don't want a guy in the group that thinks it's okay to have sex with children, and you don't want a guy in the group that thinks it's okay to steal all your shit, and you don't want a guy in the group that thinks it's okay to take a shit in your cereal, right? You're gonna need some collection of like beliefs that all of you guys agree with.
Commit social justice in the cereal.
Yeah, you have to have an agreement here, but the problem I think is that the groups have gotten so huge that now the teams that we belong to can't possibly accurately in a healthy manner represent what we should feel. Like if you go to a particular neighborhood, you're gonna find a lot of cohesion there. But when you try to say like everybody across the country, like you're a worker in a warehouse in Louisiana and you need to have a really strong opinion on Leah Thomas, or you're a guy that lives in Bakersfield, you're in Central California, but you need to know everything about AOC. Or it's like now the groups are so huge that all the ideological conformity across so many different people, I think is like really destructive.
So I'll push back on that, because even if that is operative in these large-scale communal, to have group cohesion, that you need some ideological positions around which one marshals, that shouldn't be the case. Or maybe it can be achieved differently if at conferences you had representatives, the best representatives, not morons, like the best representatives of people who disagree speaking. And then you have some kind of dialectic in which people engage. And it's that process that I don't see. And it's that process that bothers me deeply, because it's unclear to me how those people could know if they had the truth. The only way you would know that, you need a corrective mechanism. Like you need some way.
Why does it matter if you have the truth? Who cares?
Well, I guess it depends if you don't care about the truth. What role I guess it depends. It's not bad at all if you're honest about it and say, I don't really care what's true. I just want to be a hedonist, or I just want to live my life the way I do. But I think it was Hannah Arendt who said, the very fact that one possesses an ideology means that the things within that ideology, they believe those things are true. And so at the end of the day, unless you're explicitly not making truth claims like many of the postmodernists, but even the postmodernists, they're not claiming that the world doesn't exist. They're just claiming that those power structures mediate the relationships and how you understand what is true. They're not repudiating, most of them, some radicals are, but they're not repudiating the notion of truth entirely. So
I think that when I think of truth to an individual for how humans exist, I view truth as way more of an instrument than an actual like end goal in and of itself, which I think is sad. I think there should be some adherence to figure out what is actually true and whatnot. But I think that truth and the way that people approach it is usually just a way to reconcile cognitive dissonances. And as long as a particular set of facts is serving your purpose, people's adherence is going to be way higher to things that satisfy your baser Maslow's hierarchy of needs than like strict adherence to some, being epistemically humble and trying to pursue truth as much as possible. Because I remember I used to say things where we would argue about things like religion, or we'd argue about like certain social values. And like, I don't know why you would ever like not feel strongly about this particular thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Okay, sorry. I like to ground out in real examples. A lot of people complain about having their family member or family members not accept their significant other. And in my mind, that's impossible. Like if I ever had like a mom or dad that was trashing my significant other, I would just never talk to my parents again. Like that's an easy choice for me. But I realize in saying that and reflecting and then in talking to a lot of people, just arbitrarily cutting out your family or cutting out your family because they don't accept your partner, that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to do, especially if you still live with them. Like if you're college, you still live with them, or if you're in high school or whatever. So I think a lot of people will try to maintain adherence to like the social groups that they're in, to kind of make their life function and work, rather than I'm going to go live and be homeless if that's what it takes for me to adhere strictly to the truth. You'd rather accept a couple other things to have that acceptance with a social group than to commit to like the most hardcore radical truth-seeking pattern you can have. Another great example. This is the internet.
Hold on.
Yeah, go. Sorry. You can always come back.
There's so much there.
Go.
Can I ask you personal questions?
Yeah.
Are you close to your parents?
No, not as much, which is why let me be very clear when I say that.
Right.
I love my mom and dad a lot. I love them a ton, but I'm just like kind of distant from a lot of my family.
Yeah, and do you think that is the reason that you would defer to your relationship as opposed to your parents' approbation of that relationship?
I mean, I hope not, but it might be, and I'm not aware of it, right? Like I would hope that even if I had a strong relationship with my family, if they were trashing a significant other, that I would say, well, no, that's not acceptable. Like if you're gonna keep doing that, I'm gonna choose my partner that I chose, but I mean, who's to say, right?
What if they were trashing your significant other because they thought she was bad? You're straight, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they were trashing because they thought it was bad for you.
That's different. That's not what I'm talking about.
Oh,
I mean, like if they say, I don't mean that they're like, this person is like trashy and like you can do better. I mean like they're like racist, or they're like, I don't like your significant other because like I don't like what their parents.
Okay, those are red lines. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So that view of truth that you exposited there, that's to me, that's an instrumental view of truth. Mm-hmm. I do not possess. I think Peterson kind of possessed that. The me thing. I do not view that at all. I think that there's something that enables you to get through the day like that, and there's something. I think that the force of evolution in general, we haven't evolved to be truth-seeking beings. We've evolved to understand conditions through natural selection that enable us to procreate.
That's really important. I got a lot of boos at audiences when I say that, but humans are not truth-seeking machines at all. That's a very unnatural. There's a lot you have to unlearn, right? 100%. When you do philosophy, the whole goal is to make almost everything queer and alien to you. It's like, what the fuck? I don't understand how. Like a lot of that building block is peeling back all of the initial biases you have, and a lot of people have a hard time accepting that. Like the example I was going to give earlier was like the internet. People thought that when the internet came out, holy shit, everybody's going to be a fucking genius. We've got all the information everywhere. When in reality, you see that truth as an instrument. Well, now you have the ability to find whatever truth you want, whatever actually fits you the best. And it's unfortunate, but
I think by and large, you really. How old are you?
35.
I've had so many people say to me that, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I've had so many people say to me that you're like a younger version of me.
Okay.
Has anybody said that to you?
I've heard people overlap our stuff a lot because of the epistemic exercises you do with like college students and stuff.
Oh yeah, the spectrum-street epistemology. Sometimes when I listen to your conversations, I think that a lot of that stuff can be cleared up. Like if you look at this as a cognitive or epistemological intervention, to just say to somebody right in the beginning, okay, like how important is truth to you? And then like frame the conversation around what is true and if they want to know things that are true. And that will cause them to shed some of these sclerotic notions of, I have to adhere to this belief because it's a community. I have to be very recalcitrant when it comes to this. But I think in the context of a conversation, when you frame it around what's true, you can cut through a lot of the noise, and then be off and running. I'm just thinking of the conversations I've had with people about religion, because when we do the spectrum street epistemology, we're going after the sacred cows most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree that there's verbiage you can use, and there's a way that you can set somebody's mind to start thinking about things a bit more critically. Yeah. Because people are very intelligent. Your brain is a wonderful machine, and most people have, causal, deductive, they can follow the stuff. Most of what makes it difficult is to pull somebody away from all the other junk that's making things like really confusing. An example I bring up a lot on stream is for a while I started betting people on their beliefs, because I was like, okay, well, if you believe this, you're telling me that you feel 99 to 1. You're 99% sure this is going to happen. Okay, so then if I bet you $100, you should be willing to stake $99,000 against me. Right. Very confident. I expected one of two things to happen. I either expected people to tell me to fuck off, or I expected people to maybe take like really bad bets because they were way overconfident. But a third thing happened a lot that was really surprising.
Can I guess?
Yeah.
They accepted?
No. More surprising than that is they started to hedge incredibly appropriately. I had a conversation with a guy before, and he was like, "Oh no, Trump's going to win 100%. This blah 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 blah." And I offered. It's like, "Okay, you're so sure. Like, I put money on the election. Sure, I bet money on Biden. Yeah, I'll bet like $500. What are you going to give me odds? Because you're so sure, right? You give me 10 to 1, 5 to 1, 3 to 1, anything."
At 100%.
And rather than accept that or tell me to reject it, he's like, "Okay, maybe one of the indictments ends up being something that he gets convicted for. He could have a health issue." As they start talking, I'm like, so okay, hold on. You have all the information. You have it in here. It's there. And when you're forced to actually stick at a certain position, you do actually start to go through that logical thought process. But prior to that, nobody's holding you accountable for anything. That's true of even people in my position. Nobody holds content creators or alternative media people accountable for being wrong. There's a lot of reward for being hyperbolic, right? Nobody's going to listen to me if I'm like, I think Biden has a 52% chance of winning the election. They want to hear Trump has no shot.
Like the Matt Walsh thing I'm thinking about.
Yeah. So I think there's just a lot of the stuff that pushes people into bad epistemic practices have nothing to do with philosophy or epistemology at all. It just has to do with like social cohesion and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny if you were 100% on something, or at least I found, well, one, you'd give odds commensurate with that. Those being 100, and that means you're
big odds.
Like that means that, like there's no chance.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm 100% of like. I mean, the Earth existed before I was born, or this is a hand. They'll give you 100%. Okay, so a few things that I'm thinking of. I've been accused. I've been accused of Nazi, grifter, moron. I get those a lot. Those are the most common ones. You've been accused of a whole bunch of things. Slander, slurs, etc. I wanted to take a look at this idea that you and I are grifters.
Okay.
And so my first question to you is, and then I'm going to ask you to interrogate me to see if I'm a grifter on something.
Okay.
So, like, what do you take the word grifter to mean? Let's start there.
Grifter is basically you don't have a genuine belief in the thing that you're professing to an audience, but you know that it's what the audience wants to hear, and you know there's a lot of money to be made there.
That's what I take it to be too. Okay, so we're on the same page as that. So that's the other technique, like define the words up front, everybody's on the same page.
A lot of people use grifter as like a person's changed beliefs, or they just make money off their political beliefs too, which I think is stupid, because I don't know, a lot of people use grifter in dumb ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think if someone changes their beliefs, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can change beliefs for good or bad reasons, but regardless,
Yeah.
like let's say, for instance, let's say you have a certain set of beliefs, and then everybody here, you get into a really bad altercation, people bully the fuck out of you, and now you change your beliefs or whatever. That doesn't mean you're a grifter, just because you change your beliefs.
It could be a good thing. If nobody ever changed their beliefs, that would be, again, that idea of doxastic closure. You have a closed, sometimes it's a different way, epistemic closure. Okay.
Sure.
So,
which, funnily enough, some people consider a virtue. It's funny when you argue against religious people, they'll go, your science has changed like so many times, and my book has been the same for 1,500 years or 2,000 years. It's like, is that supposed to be an argument in your favor? It's like, but I understand some people.
Yeah, even in the language we use, like flip-flop is a negative thing, as opposed to, well, new evidence came in. Remember, I think it was I don't know, even like changing positions. You said you would commit this many troops in the ground when you ran. Yeah, but I didn't have, that was the time T, and the time T1, I had new evidence, of Hezbollah or whatever. Okay, so let's try to figure out if you and I are grifters.
Okay.
Okay, so I've read someone's accused you of, I don't want to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but people have accused you of grifting about Israel. What do you think, so is there a test that we can conduct to see if we're grifters?
If we define